Well, it's 7:02 and I've got a little bit of an introductory comment, so I guess I'll get started. And I wanted to, I think everybody on this call is going to be a member of the League of Women Voters of Champaign County. And I wanted to explain sort of the league background of what we're doing tonight. Criminal justice reform has become a national topic, but also a state and a local topic. And the State League of Women Voters looked at their position on criminal justice and realized that it hadn't been reviewed and revised in 25 years. And obviously an awful lot has changed in our understanding of criminal justice in the last 25 years. So the State League starts a process called, updating its position, which will be coming up for a vote in the 2021 convention. And that's a process by which all of the local leagues provide input to the state on their positions, on their suggested positions. And here we have a study committee that is looking at all the proposed changes, and we'll have a formal consensus meeting of all of our league members in January. But in the meantime, we wanted to provide our members with some information concerning the topics, the important issues that are going to be presented by that update study. And one of the issues is policing. The current state league does not have a position on policing, and our local league does not have a position on policing. And this is important because the league cannot speak as a body unless we have an adopted position to base what we're saying. And so that's basically the purpose of this process, is to adopt a position from which we can act locally and on the state level to support these necessary reforms. So tonight we have Deb Feinen, Mayor of Champaign, and Diane Marlin, Mayor of Urbana, and they're going to talk to us about changes and issues in policing in Champaign and Urbana. And so, Diane, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Trish. It's great to be here. And I look forward to the day when I see three-dimensional people again, but at least we're here on a screen. As you've said, we really are at a crossroads in history, not only with the pandemic, which was enough and overwhelming, but then we really have come face to face with issues of equity and race, and we have to face, criminal justice and public safety in Urbana, in our country for that matter. It became pretty clear after listening to, many members of the public over the past summer that some themes emerged that people really wanted us to look at, and we're taking our cues from that. First is, it's not just about policing. That's part of the public safety conversation, but really I think the bigger question is what do we define? What is public safety? What do we define public well-being as? What's a healthy community? What's a safe community? And where does policing fall into that big picture? People want accountability. That just comes through over and over again. So everything that we do has to have, is through a lens of accountability. We're looking at questions of when people call for help, who's the appropriate responder and what type of response is needed. Many types of calls fall on the shoulders of our police department right now because there's nobody else to answer them. And I think they do an excellent job in our community, but do they best serve the needs of the community? Are they the best trained to respond? And are there ways we can start to look at what are our police responding to and who should actually be with them on the call or taking the call instead. And just for example, in Urbana, we have roughly every year about 27,000 calls for service. To put in perspective, use of force is used in between 100 and 150 of those calls. So, 99.5% of the calls are answered by police. They don't involve a force-related response, but they do involve many, many different types of responses where you have to use de-escalation and you deal with a lot of different problems. So we're looking at big picture. Why are people calling the police, and who's responding, and is this the best response we can provide? And then it all also comes down to how are we going to allocate our resources. So those are some of the big picture items we're looking at. And then we have a lot of initiatives underway that we've gotten started in the last 6 months. And I don't know if this is the time to talk about them, or you want to hold off on that.
No, that would be a good idea. Let's talk about
one of the first things we did, and Urbana had some catching up to do. There's no doubt about it. So actually, I admit it, and we're tackling that. And one of our challenges, our police department was doing a lot of the things that people are recommending that they do, but it wasn't documented. So people don't know that it's actually occurring. So one of the first things we did this summer is we worked with the NAACP and the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police, and we adopted the 10 shared principles. And those principles reflect many of the recommendations from the President Obama's 21st century policing document. And we held a City Council affirmed those principles in June. We held a workshop with the NAACP and the chiefs in September, and the officers have undergone training in those principles over the past couple of 2-3 months. So that was the first, that's a framework for how our department is operating now. And we have joined the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. It's called GARE, and that's a national organization that really just provides a framework for approaching just about everything you do and looking at it through a lens of racial justice and equity. And I think if you're going to make systemic change and permanent change, you have to systematically start looking at every single thing you do. And so we're going to use the resources of GARE to help us do that. One of the things I'm very excited about, it's been in the works for a couple of years. We're launching it early next year. It's called One Door. It's a collaborative effort between City of Urbana, and it actually grew out of the Urbana Police Department. Lieutenant Sanders, who's very active in the crisis intervention training and response, but it's with the Urbana Police Department, Carl Foundation Hospital, See You at Home, and Rosecrans. So what this is in a nutshell is a response to people in crisis. So it's an alternative to your standard traditional policing response to people in crisis. So it could be people with mental health issues, substance abuse, a number of different situations, but it's not just sending law enforcement officers out to a call, to some of these calls for service. And it will provide an alternative for us, other than taking a person to jail or sending them to the emergency room or sending them back home where they're really not getting the treatment they need. So the Urbana City Council voted when we were in our budget process to reallocate about $130,000 from police salary lines. So that was the equivalent of one patrol officer and a vehicle purchase last year. And $75,000 of that is going to go to pay for the director of the One Door program to get it stood up. So it's going to be a pilot program in the city of Urbana. So the idea is that a person who's in crisis someone calls for help. The social service component is there with the police response, and they're taken, if they need to, they can go to See You at Home. That will actually, the men's shelter will be renovated to accommodate people coming there for services, and then referral to other agencies and services. So the idea is to really start to address and respond in a way that people need. And just as an example, I asked for a couple of examples from the department, and in terms of the resources that are consumed by trying to help people in crisis. So we had one person who, in the past 30 days, the Urbana Police Department was called to the same address 13 times in the 30-day period. So roughly every other day, our department was responding to a call. It was with a person who had delusional paranoia and substance abuse. So these kinds of calls require an enormous amount of time and patience, and our officers are actually really good at dealing with folks, but they don't have places they can take people for help. And so they, over and over again, you get called to a home and you deal with the immediate crisis, and then you leave and the person is still there in the home. And then, a couple of days later, it happens again. So we're hoping One Door will provide some alternatives for the people who need help. And it will reduce the demands on our police officers, and it will actually, most importantly, serve the community better. So that's one example what's happening. And council will vote on the final vote on the allocation will be this coming Monday. And then we hope to get that up and running as a pilot program January of next year. So.
I'll just ask a question here. Sure. At what point does the alternative of different kinds of services come in? It's not when the call first comes out, but when the police officer arrives at the scene, or how does that?
Well, first someone has to respond to the scene, and it may be just the police officer. It may be a joint response. They'll have folks from Rosecrans on call. And then the idea is to, if it's appropriate, they would take them to see you at home, the shelter where they could be evaluated and then connected with services. So it's going to be, I think each call is going to be a little bit different. So they're going to have to feel their way through it to get started. But the big difference here is that our officers will have a network that they can work with and depend on to help respond to the calls. So it's a pilot. It's going to be an experiment, and but I think we've got some really strong partners. And this has been in the works in the planning for probably a couple years. But it just was obvious we have to just try it, because you have to start doing things different. And if people are interested in learning more, there will be a detailed presentation to Urbana City Council on December 21st. So the Carl Rosecrans and I think Rob Dahlhaus from See You at Home, and maybe some of the other partners involved, will be doing a presentation at council. So that's a good time to learn more about it.
And if someone wanted to watch the council meeting, how would they go about doing that?
They would go to the Urbana City Council website and you click on the government tab, and under that is City Council, and then links to the meetings are there, and then they're all Zoom, of course. So.
Yeah. And I saw a recording of the workshop that you had with the NAACP and the chiefs of police, the Illinois chiefs of police, and it was very impressive, the cooperation and the working between, the officers and the members of the community on these 10 shared principles. So can you tell us a little bit more about the 10 principles?
Sure. They were, I think, first adopted, and Champaign adopted these, I think it was in 2018. They were jointly developed in Illinois with the NAACP and the Illinois Association of Police Chiefs. And so they affirmed principles. They value the life of every person. Everybody should be treated with dignity and respect. They reject discrimination. They support the pillars that were outlined in President Obama's 21st Century Policing document. They believe in procedural justice. The emphasis on community policing, which means you build trust. It's all about, really, this is fundamentally behind these is a building of trust between the community and the police. and building relationships, diversity in police departments, and a real emphasis on de-escalation, training, use of it, and trying to reduce the potential for confrontations, which is, the goal of everyone. So these tactics or these principles were, they should be the foundation. They are the foundation of the way our department is approaching things now. And we really were using a lot of these already. And we just needed to do a better job of documenting that. And along those lines, one of the other projects underway is a complete update of our use of force policy, which, like your league policies that are 25 years old, well, our use of force policy hadn't been updated in years, and it really didn't reflect what was being done today. So it's important for people to know, and that's part of accountability, is to make sure you let people know what you're actually doing.
Yeah. We're going to go to Deb right now, and then we'll have questions after the both mayors have spoken, just because of the difficulty of muting and unmuting. So why don't, Deb, if you could tell us what's happening in Champaign.
Sure. Thank you all for inviting me. As I looked at the faces and the names, I couldn't help but smile. There are so many people that have been actively involved in community work and government work, really during my entire career. And it's really good to be able to be here with you tonight, and that you continue to be involved is really impressive. So based on 2019 numbers, just to give you a little bit of background about our department, we had almost 62,000 emergency calls in the city of Champaign. We have 131 sworn officers, 27 civilian staff. We are right now down, I believe, 14 officers so we have positions that are not that were not filled or haven't been filled. We've been recruiting, but we have not been able to fill those positions yet. And it takes, Trish probably knows better than I do, but something like 6 to 8 months from the time of hiring to actually get an officer on the street with all of the training that goes in. So it's going to be a while before we are up to our 131 sworn officers. So Champaign Police is committed to fostering positive and diverse citizen police relationships by advancing community policing techniques. Each of our officers that are hired must pass an extensive background and investigation prior to receiving an offer of employment. Many individuals who are screened for employment with Champaign Police do not pass the background investigation and are removed from the selection process. Chief Cobb, who sits on the hiring panel, is looking for public servants who are committed to treating everyone with unconditional respect. In 2015, Champaign's police strategic planning process sought input from the community through surveys, citizen dialogue, and the Community Coalition, reinforcing the most effective way to build trust and to reduce crime was through strong collaborative community relationships. To help accomplish this goal, the department authorizes 1 hour of on-duty time each month for every employee to conduct community service work with individuals and groups in Champaign. And in 2019, the Champaign Police Department did more than 1,200 hours of community engagement, opening new lines of communication with our community, helping to learn, listen, and address concerns together. Our city understands transparency, and it's an important step in the process of building trust between police and residents. Champaign Police introduced the use of body-worn cameras in the spring of 2017 to aid in capturing audio and video recordings of daily police-citizen interactions. A body camera was purchased for every sworn officer within the department, and uniformed officers wear body cameras as part of their daily uniform, and it is turned on when an officer is responding to calls for service or engaged in any law enforcement related action. The department also closely monitors and analyzes each and every incident where force is used by an officer. The Champaign Police collaborates with citizens to help review the use of force through our Use of Force Review Committee. All incidents involving force by members of the department go through a supervisory review, beginning with the officer sergeant, lieutenant, and deputy chief, and additionally the Use of Force Review Committee, which includes citizen members and began reviewing use of force incidents in 2018. It's to meet monthly to review incidents where use of force, where force was used by an officer, including the review of police records and video. And after each incident, the review committee determines if the force was reasonable and consistent with our department policy. After review, training and tactical considerations are identified and distributed during the patrol briefings, so training points and other feedback can be relayed back to our officers. Champaign Police also has a citizen review committee, which is responsible for leading an unbiased investigation and review of citizen complaints made against the Champaign Police Department. This subcommittee helps promote public confidence in the professionalism and accountability of the Champaign Police Department, and advises on policy recommendations and public outreach to help improve community police relations. In 2019, our Champaign Police completed more than 21,000 hours of department training. Champaign police officers are required to attend classes related to cultural competency, civil rights, human rights, constitutional and proper use of authority, and procedural justice. Dozens of officers are trained in crisis intervention. We had plans to train even more. COVID and budget restrictions may slow that down, even though it has been authorized. The department has also had officers specifically trained in mental health awareness. And importantly, verbal de-escalation is a fundamental principle of Champaign police officers. Officers attend de-escalation training, which is conducted locally by Dr. Michael Schlosser, at the director of the Illinois Police Training Institute, to help learn how to resolve matters through techniques such as communication, so they can diffuse potentially dangerous situations. The Champaign Police Department, our chief has signed the NAACP shared principles. As mayor, I have taken the Obama Foundation 8 Can't Wait pledge, and we are committed to the 21st century policing principles from President Obama. Currently, we have updated our police policy to make clear that there is a ban on chokeholds and that there is an affirmative duty to intervene if a police officer sees a fellow officer doing something that is harming an individual or that is not authorized by the department regulations. We are in process with what we first had were police listening sessions, where we had many, I can't remember how many, maybe 6 different, at different times, opportunities for members of the public to talk to the city council and police about issues that they believe we need to address within the community and to give us ideas for changes to our department. We followed those with study circles, which were really supposed to be opportunities for more intimate discussion. That's a little bit hard to do via Zoom, but we did have breakout sessions with small groups so people would have that opportunity facilitated. That information will be coming back to council, and then staff and council will be working to formulate recommendations for changes to strategic planning with police. Additionally, we had authorized in March 6 additional police officer, patrol officer positions. because we have police officers who are exhausted because of the high volume of calls and not having enough people on the streets to manage them. That stress and activity is something that we worry about leading to incidents as well, because people who have been working for long hours or called back on shifts are not maybe in the freshest as they're going out onto the streets. Last night at our city council meeting, though, council agreed to keep those positions as defunded in our budget, but not list them as patrol officers, but generally police personnel, recognizing that we want to hear what the input was from the public and perhaps do more creative thinking about the kinds of positions we need in police to both help the community and the officers. Doing things like Urbana is leading the way on with mental health with their one-door policy, may be things that Champaign will be considering adopting as we finish up our process. So we're trying to leave our options open with those 6 additional positions. And that, I think, gives you kind of some background and an update as to where we are in Champaign.
Okay, right now then we can go to questions. I'm going to, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and Kathy Hatch will be watching the chat and bringing them up for the discussion. But otherwise, if you have questions, raise your hand and I'll recognize you. Minnie, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, all right. This is a point of information in addition to Champaign and Urbana signing off on the NAACP 10 shared principles. Also, our county sheriff, Dustin, has also signed off on the 10 principles with his chiefs of police. And so there's consistency across the board. And I just want to say that I'm extremely impressed and pleased at the efforts that are put in by both the Champaign Police Department and especially the Urbana Police Department. They're going way out. And that tells me as the leader of the NAACP that they are interested in building trust between the community in the way the Black community and Brown community is policed. So I'm in regular communications with the chiefs. And so I am very, very pleased at where we're going. Now, this is not going to happen overnight. It's a process. But in order to get it right, we don't want to rush anything. We want to, get input from the community as we go along. We want to do assessments. We want to know that there's not a lot of pushback with our police officers, that everybody is buying into what this is all about, building trust and respect. And how the community feels about policing as well. So with the talks on both Champaign and the Urbana, I think we're going in the right direction. And so I'm anxious to hear more about a little later in January with Chief Serafin on his, the door and everything. So I'm very, very pleased. Thank you.
Thanks, Minnie. So I'm sure there are some more questions. Peggy?
Hi, thank you. Thank you both, Mayor Marlin and Mayor Feinen. Mayor Marlin, I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about the one-door policy, one-door pilot. It sounds very exciting, and it reminds me, and I think you might have said it's based on the similar program that's been going on in Eugene, Oregon for, 30 years or something. The acronym is CAHOOTS, it stands for. Yeah. But as I understand the one in Eugene, Oregon, which I think has been quite successful, is that a 911 dispatcher filters the calls, and if the situation is criminal or violent, a police officer is sent out. If it's otherwise a crisis that's not criminal or violent, a crisis service provider goes out. And what I was told is that just that fact alone, having someone who looks more civilian-like and especially trained, helps to de-escalate the situation. It's less threatening than an armed police officer, you know, who may go out and then decide to send someone else. It's sometimes just the presence of an armed police officer can escalate, you know, and otherwise, you know, can escalate a situation. Did I understand you to say that you thought that the one-door pilot, that a police officer would always be the first responder, and then that police officer would then determine whether someone instead or in addition would go
Yeah.
out?
I mean, some of the details are still being worked out, but at this point, I believe it's more of a co-responder model, and then we'll see how it goes. But the idea is to learn as we go and figure out how best to you know, direct these calls. And when it comes to the training the dispatchers, that's another whole area that has to be done very thoughtfully. So I think to begin with, it'll be more of a co-responder model. But many of our officers are trained in crisis. They're CIT trained, so they have the crisis intervention training, and they recognize and they have a lot of experience already. So I think it'll work. It'll work to start with, and then of course the goal is to have this expand throughout the rest of the community.
And
It's going to be costly, but then the cost of not doing something is even higher. So we're starting small.
And one of the aspects, of course, is that Urbana doesn't have control over the dispatchers, which are countywide and MetCat employees. So,
Gotcha.
Although we do have a seat on the policy board, but
But we are going to have to all work together.
we are.
I mean,
Yeah.
that'll be a county Champaign and Rantoul decision.
and Kathleen, I know you mentioned a couple times that you had experience in an earlier era along these lines. Why did you share that with us?
Much earlier era, 1977, as I was a graduate, I think I was a graduate student in social work at the university. There was an organization called Metro Police Social Services. A social worker was assigned to each police department, university, Urbana, and Champaign. And as an intern, I went out with the police when they called. And mind you, we had a different world then. We had places that we could take people who had mental health issues. That's not the case anymore. And so the police have a really tough time. And if they had social workers, a really tough time finding out where to send people for rehab, for medication. It's a different world. Doesn't mean we shouldn't address it, but there are models out there, and I applaud both mayors for looking at how to do this differently, because it's been done differently in the past.
Yeah. More questions? Kathy?
There's one from the chat room, and Sarah writes and asks, she says, Kyle Patterson, the newly county board chair, in the News Gazette today, says that social justice issues are a priority. How will each of you coordinate and collaborate with the county board?
Well, I look forward to collaboration. We have a lot of, our populations we serve the same populations and face the same challenges. I think one of our biggest challenges is the issue of the jails, what to do with those as facilities, but also how should they be used. And I think that's a major issue that the board and the city of Urbana, for sure, in terms of the downtown jail, are going to have to be looking at. But in the broader sense, we will be working very closely, I think, with the county in terms of approaching, how are we approaching public safety and defining public safety in the community.
I would say that one of the silver linings of the pandemic has been that we have all had a crash course in working together in a way that we have never had to before. And we are regularly meeting with the county. And I say we, I'm including Diane in that, but Champaign and Urbana and the county public health district, the university. And the relationships that have been built over this very long year, I think are going to lead to opportunities for change and investment together that this community has never seen as we come out of the pandemic. We have sort of all put down our barriers and you know, our protection of of our own community. We've realized we are one big community, not all these little communities individually. And I think that will be the thing that drives us all to do big things together.
And I would salute the Chancellor Jones at the university. He launched an initiative on racial and social justice last month. We have subcommittees working, representatives from all the communities on different areas, but all through a lens of equity. And we expect some things to come out of that as well. But yeah, the degree of collaboration is just, it's phenomenal at this point.
It works really well until you start splitting up the money. Is that always?
Well, none of us have enough money, so you know.
Right. And I know this isn't the topic of this conversation, but it is certainly disturbing that despite all of the efforts by all of, you know, the participants in Champaign and Urbana and the county to address gun violence, we still see a rising tide almost of gun violence in our poor and African American communities. And do you have any
I have good news on that front. Well, not good news about gun violence, but despite the $2.5 or so million we just cut out of we had a study session last night to organize the budget cuts we're going to make. Council agreed to continue with about half of the funding that we originally planned to do, but with what we're calling the LIFT program, which is a children and family wraparound program in conjunction with Unit 4. And with Unit 4's money, we'll have about $500,000 in to get this program off the ground. And it is really aimed at high-risk students, but it's an attempt to not just try to work with the student, but to wrap around the student's entire family, including any siblings and parents or adults in the household. And that is really aimed at trying to get at the core issues that are driving some of the gun violence. So
Yeah.
Champaign is continuing with that despite our budget cuts.
Yeah, it's the root you know, we've been trying to address gun violence for many years through the Community Coalition and CU Fresh Start. And what we're seeing are younger and younger people involved. And it was just a tragic incident in Urbana a couple of weeks ago now, where 5 or 6 kids were in a weight room in one of the apartment complexes, and one 14-year-old had a Nerf gun and another 16-year-old had a loaded real gun, and they were playing around and he accidentally shot his friend in the stomach. And when you think about kids with Nerf guns, and that's what they should, if they're going to have a gun, it should be a Nerf gun, but these kids are getting hold of loaded weapons that are easily available on the streets, and we have to figure out how to deal with that. But we had a very bright spot today also in Urbana, where there's a program that Carle Hospital has started in conjunction with the Housing Authority of Champaign County, and the city of Urbana partnered with it. You may or may not know, Carle Hospital owns probably 50 homes in the neighborhood, mostly north of the hospital campus. And they had been renting those out. I think they were purchased over the years, you know, with an idea of expansion. But anyway, they have about 50 homes. They took 3 of those homes and donated them to the Housing Authority. They're being rehabbed, and they will be used for a wraparound program for families that have either were homeless or very housing insecure. So there's this joint program with the Housing Authority, the city, and Carl will provide secure housing for people, which is the first thing, and deal with issues, anything related from food insecurity. There's a job training component and provide wraparound services. So the idea is to start to get at, the root causes for why kids are turning to violence, and what are the, you've got to look at the whole life. You can't just look at one particular behavior. So we're hoping to expand that approach and use a number of these homes, and they're really they're very nice homes. A number of these homes to get people into housing, and again, support the families, because unless you're supporting the families, you're not going to be supporting the kids. So,
more questions? Minnie.
And also, when you're talking about gun violence, most of these children do know that in carrying on with the guns and using them the way they do, that is a form of suicide. So they know that where they're going to end up once they get into practice of doing that. So mental illness, trauma, all of those things, the lifestyle that they were raised and born and see every day and live every day, and the competition to possibly, and it's sad to say, with drug money and the little money that they can get used by, I believe, and I truly do believe this, that there are some grown-ups behind this that is benefiting from this, but it's teenage suicide is a big problem right now, especially among the Black community, and a lot of other aspects too, but they know what's going to happen eventually. Some of them it's an accident, some of them are playing around, some of them, but most of them they know that living the lifestyle that they're living, that they're going to die early. And it's a form of suicide.
It's very, very sad to hear. And just emphasizes again how the destruction of our mental health system has really impacted everybody. Kathleen?
I agree that it's the mental health system, but I also think there's a real system of racism that has infected all of us, and particularly our young Black folk. And until we deal with that, we can't push it off onto things like mental health. We have to talk about our systemic racism in this society.
Okay, more questions. Come on, you guys. I know you got something. Peggy?
Could I ask the mayors about their view of the civilian review boards? I've only followed them very peripherally, but I understand at least that they sometimes fall short of what they hope to achieve as the eyes and ears of civilians and implement needed changes on our police forces. So I'm wondering, do you think they function as they should? And if not, what changes would you like to see in your respective civilian review boards so that they can be an effective check liaison between the police departments and our community?
That's a great question. And no, ours is not functioning as well as it could. It was one of the first civilian review boards that was established, I think, in the state of Illinois. I believe it was around 2008. So it's been around a while. It was set up as an appeals board so that if a person wants to files a complaint with the police department, it is handled through the police chief and this leadership team. And most of the time that when complaints come in, they're resolved at that level. It depends on the type of complaint and that sort of thing, but vast majority of the complaints are resolved. But if the civilian is not satisfied with the police department's response, then they go to our civilian police review board, which is an appeals board. So they have the right to appeal the chief's decision to the board. Recently, people have The public has asked for changes. I think we're absolutely open to that. And it's one of those things that it's going to take work to make the changes that are needed, but we're certainly open to it. And again, the goal is to develop a process that people trust. If they don't trust the process, there's no point in having it. So it has to be that people will trust and that will hold everyone accountable, and that provides fairness to both the members of the public and the police. So yeah, we have work to do. I'll be the first to admit it. It's just we can't do, we have a lot of work to do in Urbana. But anyway, we're getting started.
Ours is, yeah, I'd like to say it's brand new. It's not really totally brand new, but it began in 2017. It took some time to get members appointed and trained and convened. So it's really only been a few years that our Citizen Review Board has been functioning. So, you know, I think that it's a testament to the members of that board that they have taken their roles very seriously. And they have actually gone through and audited police policy and suggested changes, some of which have been adopted by the chief. They do an annual report each year to the city council, along with their review of complaints. The way they sit in our complaint process is the standards board and the investigation happens within the department. It then goes to citizen review, who reviews to make sure that that was a fair process. And then all of that information, if they think additional investigation needs to be made, it's kind of referred back to the department to do that. If they agree with the process, it all gets forwarded to the chief for then a decision about the complaint. They do have subpoena power because they sit as a subcommittee of the Human Relations Commission in the city of Champaign, and the Human Relations Commission has subpoena power. But we have had some incredibly active members, and I am sure that over time we will tweak and update what it is that that board does, but we are still getting our sea legs. So where Diane is at the point where it's time to update and revise because they were early adopters, we really just went through a process where we looked at citizen review boards across the country and, you know, kind of put together what we thought would be best practices to try it in Champaign.
One of the first thing we've done, and it's been internally, not so much at the board level, is there's basically 3 different models for civilian review boards. And a lot of the model you adopt, a lot of that depends on the size of the city and the resources that you have. So for a small city like Urbana, it wouldn't be the same, probably the same sort of model and scope that you could have in a city like, you know, LA. So we're looking at what we can do with the resources that we have to provide the accountability that people want. And I would add, we're going to be adding a public member to our internal use of force committee as well. So that's another goal on the police chief's list to do for the early next year. So we'll be doing that as well.
Carolyn, you had a question? You're muted, Carolyn. Tell you what, well,
Okay. Yeah. So I have a question about the availability of mental health services. When I was practicing law, I had clients who had to be hospitalized, clients who had to have therapy and had no money. And it was difficult, but not impossible, to get services for them. What is the situation now? You keep referring to it and I don't understand.
I'm not sure. I certainly don't have an idea, have a grasp of the overall mental health services in the community. Do either of the mayors want to, or anybody else who's involved want to chime in here?
I would defer to an expert.
I know when I was, so I'm not in private practice anymore. I did a lot of work when I was with guardianship and mental health issues. And the state of Illinois was like 49th in the ranking of all states in providing funding for mental health services. I haven't seen any dramatic improvement in my time as mayor, but I don't have, you know, latest information on, you know, wait lists and access at this time.
And yeah, and I don't either. But as I took a walk through the jail in Urbana, I was, you know, really shocked at the number of people there that was held there because of mental health issues. And so I thought it was kind of strange that they would be housed in jail and not in a facility that would be more appropriate for them. So I would be interested as well. But I also found out that the medicine that they have, a lot of the people who have those issues, they have them on. Once they start feeling better, they stop taking the medicine. And because they think that they're cured and that everything is fine. So they become a problem for their parents or their caregivers or whomever they're living with, and then they're called. But a great deal of it is because they need more services, and systemic racism is a big part. And so you have to change the structure in order to meet the needs of today, you know, the way people need them. So I think it's a huge, huge problem. The jail where they're having them, they are out in the hallway. They are not properly taken care of. And so it's kind of, it was an experience for me to see all of those kinds of things. So.
Barbara?
Following up on what Minnie just said and what Kathleen said a few minutes ago, what can not-for-profits like Rotary or League of Women Voters do about structural racism? I know the Urbana Rotary right now is working in a neighborhood that's very challenged in terms of violence and low income and bad housing and stuff. And we see it, you know, and we know that it started, they're not bad kids, but how can ordinary citizens in groups or a church, let's say, do anything about it?
That's a very good question, Barb. So do you two want to take a stab at it?
Well, my first suggestion would be to participate in the community coalition, because if you have members who are able to attend there, you will get a firsthand account of the work that is being done and figure out where people best can plug in, or, you know, what your group, if you're going to try to contribute as a group, where you would be able to plug in and help. So from my perspective, I would start there. There are certainly lots of programs that go on. If you look at the city council study sessions, you know, we are funding, you know, education hubs right now for people who, you know, they need to go to work, but their kids can't go to school. And so,
Yeah.
you know, places where,
Right.
you know, they need volunteers to help be there with the kids and help them get online and learn. You know, there are First Followers has reentry programs and welcome home programs for people as they are released from prison. I mean, there are just, you know, Dream Academy with Tracy Dace. There is no limit to the different opportunities to plug in. But in my mind, Community Coalition puts them all together in a way that you can kind of then look to see where you want to fit in.
Yes, we have all kinds of programs. We have this program for that. We have this program for that. But from the very beginning, the time that a child is born into this world, they are born into a system that has continuously failed them, whether it be the healthcare system, all kinds of systems that have failed them. And it starts much, much, much earlier than these programs that we're talking about. You have to start with early childhood education. There has to be, the school district have to change their paradigm, the way they teach children these days. The children have to be, they want to be valued. Black Lives Matter, there is a resistance against that. That tells you, that tells me and other people that you want to ignore that part, but you want to offer other programs. That is very hard. From the time these children are school age, from the time they are born, they need services there, and it builds on from there. I mean, you can't, just offer it in the middle of the stream. You've got to start with your education system. And if the system is not accommodating for people of color or brown people, it takes an effect on people very early in life. Expectations of children in school, whether they feel a part of this or not, whether they are learning. Someone needs to be held accountable for the failure of these children. They don't teach themselves. They don't learn these things themselves. And many of their parents, the school systems and the systems that we have in place that is designed to not provide them services and to keep them at a certain level, it's failing them. Some of them are born with mental issues, and that's never, ever addressed. Teachers who are teaching them do not understand cultural diversity. They don't have to. They feel like they don't have to. We, as Black people and brown people, we know more about white people than white people know about us. And so a lot of times we are, we're not accommodated, and we are in a system that is really not built for us. It is not built for us to have equality. And to have equality means somebody has to give up some power, and that people are fighting against that. So the talk in the community right now is, and we can bring politics into this, is that Donald Trump got 70 million votes. Everybody knows that if you're a Black or brown person, that means somebody is voting for racism, somebody is voting for unequal, not equality, all of these things they are voting for. And when you look at the counties around Champaign County, the counties that are voting have voted for Trump, that tells you that somebody is voting for continuation of the same old.
Thank you, Minnie. And Diane, do you want to add anything?
I would just add, I'd go back to the event that I attended today, because I think that represents a really different approach and a way of thinking. And it was the three houses that the Housing Authority and Carle Hospital and the city are rehabbing. And more importantly is the wraparound services and programs that'll be provided to the family. And I was talking with Juliana, I can't think of her last name. She's the community, one of the leaders in the community health services at Carle. And she said Carle Hospital has really started to shift their thinking in terms of how they're defining health and health care. And that's why they're investing in this program, is that they're seeing that when children and families are housing secure and they live in a home that is clean and safe, then that promotes health and wellness. And it's healthcare is not just what happens in a hospital, but it's what happens in the community. And so I think that kind of shift in thinking is what we're going to have to see to really see, permanent change. And Minnie's right, it starts from the beginning of life. And the way the kids are raised, kids learn what they live, and the learning starts the day they're born. So we start small. When you ask how you can, we start one at a time, one at a time.
Anyone else want to add a comment, Carla?
I think one of the things that white people in particular can do is to learn as much as they can about how people of color have been treated over the years. And there are an amazing number of resources out there to help understand, because I think many of us, I hear way too often, it doesn't have any, I didn't do anything wrong. You know, I never had slaves. I never, you know, you know, what do I need to do? And I think the structural racism that is rampant in the country has been the whole, our whole history. And until we as white people understand that to the core, not just superficially, but actually understand what has happened over the years and how people of color have been kept in their place, as it were, it's going to be very hard to change it. We have to take responsibility and do something about it wherever we can.
Okay, it looks like we've come to the end of our hour. I want to really thank Diane and Deb for participating, and all of you for coming and listening and asking your questions. So thank you very much, and we'll talk about these issues again in January in terms of our consensus meeting. So keep an eye out in your voter for that. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Minnie.
And Trisha.
Thank you.
Thank you.